Hello, everybody, and welcome to Law at the Library, a partnership between the Chicago Bar Association, the Evanston Public Library, and the Chicago Public Library. My name is Lorena Neal. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the legal literacy librarian at the Evanston Public Library. We're delighted to have everyone here tonight for this presentation on credit and consumer debt. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the format for this evening, and then we'll get started. I'll introduce our speakers, who will then give their presentation, followed by a question and answer period. If you have any questions for our speakers, please type them into the Q&A window, which you will find near the bottom of your Zoom screen. You can also use the chat feature to ask your questions if you would prefer that. And I will collect all of your questions as they come up and give our presenters the opportunity to answer them at the end. So feel free to add your questions whenever you think of them. If you have any technical issues or questions, feel free to direct those to me in the chat as well. Our next Law at the Library session will be on March 19th, and the topic will be buying or selling your home. And I'll put the link to register for that one in the chat in case you're interested. In the meantime, you can always see videos of previous presentations on the Evanston Public Library YouTube page, and I'll post a link to our playlist for Law at the Library in the chat as well for that in case you're interested. We do have a list of general free and low-cost legal resources at Evanston Public Library, and if you would like a copy of that list, then please feel free to email me directly. I'll put my email in the chat, and I'm happy to send you that list if you're interested in taking a look. We have three speakers joining us tonight, all from the law firm of Pilgrim Christakis. Our first speaker is Liv Lawless. Liv has extensive experience representing clients in antitrust, securities, and consumer fraud class actions. She's adept at drafting and arguing motions, conducting written and oral discovery, negotiating settlements, and getting results. Before becoming a litigator, she prepared comment letters addressing SEC and CFTC guidelines and composed memoranda on ESG-related regulations. Our second speaker is Tyler Hamilton. Tyler has extensive experience representing the financial services industry in state and federal courts around the country. He's handled all aspects of litigation from pre-suit investigations through trial and appeal, and recently second chaired a federal jury trial where he obtained a complete defense verdict on behalf of his client. Tyler also regularly advises clients on compliance, risk management, and outside audits. Our final speaker this evening is Nate Spillman. Nate has substantial experience representing clients in a wide range of complex matters in state and federal courts. His practice encompasses all aspects of civil litigation and includes assisting clients with internal investigations and compliance issues, drafting and arguing motions, conducting written and oral discovery, handling mediations and arbitrations, and resolving cases. We are thrilled to have all three of you here tonight, and I will now turn things over to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Lorena. And thank you to the Chicago Public Library for having us. We love being a part of this program. We've been involved in the Law at the Library series for a while now, and we love doing it. So thank you to everybody who attended tonight. Like Lorena mentioned, myself, Tyler, and Nate, we're all attorneys at a law firm called Pilgrim Christakis. We're based in Chicago, and we're a consumer finance boutique litigation firm. And just as a quick disclaimer to this presentation, as you hear from all attorneys, there's no attorney-client relationship that's formed by you attending this program. We're just offering information and not legal advice. But without further ado, we'll jump into our presentation, and we're excited to talk more about our series, Cleaning Up Your Credit. And Lorena, if it's possible to share the slideshow. Awesome, thank you. And this is just a little blurb with some upcoming events for the Law at the Library series that Lorena mentioned. So we can go to the next slide. Okay, great, thank you. So just as a quick overview of our program, like I said, we're going to be focusing on cleaning up your credit. So what exactly does that entail? Mainly, when we're talking about cleaning up your credit, we're talking about cleaning up your credit report. So when a creditor or a lender is going to be looking at a consumer's credit report, depending on what's included in that report, that's how a creditor will decide what type of loan and the benefits of a loan that that consumer can receive. So if you have better credit, obviously you can get a cheaper loan, a better interest rate, versus if you have less favorable credit, you might receive, different offers from lenders or creditors. So that's really the main thing that we're talking about when we're saying, cleaning this up. We're talking about the credit report. So what really is included in a credit report? The first thing, is that it contains all kinds of different information about how you pay your bills and what kinds of credit you have. So most people have a credit card, so it would show all of your credit cards. It could also show if you have a mortgage, a house payment, a car payment, maybe you have student loans. All of that information would be included in your credit report. It also includes some things that you might not think of that is accessible in the public domain. So that might be, let's say if someone files a lawsuit against you, that could be included in your credit report. If you filed for bankruptcy, that could also be included in your credit report. So lots of different types of information that you may not think about. Who provides these credit reports? Normally, the credit reports are going to come from the big three consumer reporting agencies. And normally people call these the credit bureaus. And I'm sure you've heard of, these big three before. It's Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. So those are the credit reporting agencies that compile your information and then they sell that information to creditors. So they could sell it to your employer, your landlord, anyone who's looking to pull your credit report. They're going to get it from one of these big three companies. And so that's why knowing what's in your credit report is so important, because if you're not sure exactly what's in it, you don't know what creditors, employers, insurers are going to be able to access when they pull that credit report from one of the credit bureaus. So we can hop to the next slide.
This one?
I think we just skipped over. If we could just go back one slide. Perfect. Thank you. So what information is in this credit report? So first is your personal information. So this will be like your social, your birthday, your address, that type of information. Next, you'll see credit history. So this is probably the most important piece of your credit report. So this is going to show, what loans you took out and whether or not you're paying those loans back on time. The next is going to be a credit inquiry. So a lot of people have heard about the difference between hard credit pulls and soft credit pulls. So a hard credit pull, that is what's going to impact your credit, and creditors will be able to see these on your credit report for 2 years. So what's typically associated with a hard credit pull is anytime you're applying for some type of loan. So that could even be, let's say you apply for a credit card, or maybe you apply to finance your car. That would be a hard inquiry on your credit, and that's what's going to show up when creditors access your credit report for the next 2 years. There's other types of inquiries called the soft credit pull. So this isn't going to show up on your credit report when a creditor pulls it. So this might be like when you receive in the mail a credit card and they're, asking if you'd like to apply. That's going to be a soft inquiry. Anything that, is more of a informational piece as opposed to actually applying for credit is going to be a soft pull versus a hard pull. And then that last piece is the public record. So that's what we talked about before, where you're going to see a bankruptcy, a foreclosure, maybe a tax lien, lawsuits that are filed against you. That's kind of that information that people don't generally think of that's also included in their credit report. Okay, great. And we can go to the next slide. Thank you. So where can you get your credit report? So obviously, in order to know what you need to fix or clean up in your credit, you have to be able to access that credit report first, right? So there's a few different ways that you can get access to it. This website that's included on the slide here is a great resource. Congress has made it easy so that consumers can go onto this website and they can pull their credit report. So you have a right under law to be able to access your credit report every 4 months. So you can go on this website and you can pull your full credit report once every 4 months. So because there's, those 3 major credit bureaus that we talked about, each of those credit bureaus allow you to pull a report once a year. So it's a good idea to stagger when you're going to pull those reports. So let's say you log on to the website and you pull your credit report from Equifax this month in February. You won't be able to pull another credit report from Equifax for the next year, but you would be able to pull a credit report from, let's say, TransUnion. So in 4 months, you could pull your credit report from TransUnion, and if you continue to stagger, your pulls every 4 months, you'll really be able to stay on top of your credit report. You can see exactly what information is being reported, and you don't have to worry that there is something, bad or something that's really impacting your credit score on that report that, that you might not even know about. So that's one great piece of advice. You can always also buy another copy of your credit report. Like, let's say you want to access it more than every 4 months. You can also purchase a copy. And then this last bullet point here, which talks about your right to receive a copy for adverse actions. So how this works is that, let's say an adverse action would be any time that you're denied credit. So let's say that you applied for renter insurance and you were denied. You would be able to ask for a copy of your credit report with that denial. And the credit reporting agency has to provide it. So you would have to ask for the copy. You probably wouldn't get it automatically. So this would require some action on your part. But as long as you give the credit reporting agency notice that you'd like a copy of your report, they have to provide it by law if you were denied credit. Okay, so next slide, we're going to talk about what happens if you find something on your credit that's inaccurate. So let's say you pulled your credit report, you're able to access it every 4 months, and now you're looking at your report and you see maybe a line of credit or a credit card that you didn't take out or something that's incorrect on your report. The best thing to do is to contact the credit bureau directly. So that means reaching out to Equifax, Experian, or TransUnion directly, and to do so in writing. So while all of the 3 credit reporting agencies have a phone number, it's better to file any type of request over writing. So when you're writing in to the credit reporting agencies and you're saying, hey, let's say this credit card that popped up on my credit report doesn't belong to me. You write to the agencies, you let them know what's going on, and then always include copies or any actual documents that you have that back up what you're saying. Because, the more documentation that you have, the better. And just make sure that you're very clear about exactly what you're disputing when you send that dispute to the credit reporting agencies. Keep copies of everything that you sent. Most of these credit reporting agencies have a way that you can file this dispute online. So you can have it all in writing online, and then you'll be able to track it that way. But if you do end up, physically writing it out and mailing in a copy, just make sure that you do so with certified mail so that you can track it, make sure it arrived, and just keep track of, keep hard copies of all of that information. So then once, let's say you send in this information, you send it to Equifax. Once Equifax receives the information, and let's say the dispute was that you didn't own a TJ Maxx credit card. And let's say that TJ Maxx credit card is, furnished by Bank A. Once Equifax receives your information, they have to reach out to Bank A, and tell them, hey, we have a consumer who's disputing this account. And that bank will have to look into that dispute. So this is a great way, to shine light on the problem, because that'll make sure that both the credit reporting agency is looking into the issue, and also they're going to check with the bank itself. And that's the bank, that issued the line of credit, or maybe the bank that, whatever your dispute is relating to, they'll check with the bank, and then the credit reporting agency itself will also investigate. So you'll have, some additional ways to look into the dispute and hopefully get it resolved. So, and one other quick piece to point out is that if let's say this credit card that you didn't take out is appearing on all of your credit reports with TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian, you only need to file a dispute with one of the credit agencies, and they'll notify all of the other credit agencies. So, you don't need to file the same dispute 3 times. And then, let's see, I just want to make sure we're on the right slide. Yes, we're still on it. Okay, so wait for the accurate negative information to fall off your credit report. So let's say that, you have negative information on your credit report, but it's accurate. So this wouldn't be an issue where you're actually filing a dispute with the credit reporting agency. It's more of just negative credit on your account. The main thing that you can do when, you have an issue with your account, but that it's accurate, is just to wait. So, typically credit reporting agencies can report negative information for 7 years. So that includes like a late payment, a bankruptcy, a foreclosure. Let's say a credit card goes into collections. All of that information can report on your credit for 7 years. So, that's why it's so important to try and stay on top of any issues that you may have ahead of time. Just because that information, really the only thing you can do, assuming that it's accurate, is to wait for it to fall off. And then this last bullet point talks about adding accounts to your credit report. So one thing you can do that can help bolster your credit file and, to help create a fuller picture of your credit overall, is to add beneficial or positive history to your credit report. So for example, I have a credit card where I pay my rent using that credit card. And this credit card company allows me to report on-time payments to the credit reporting agencies. So they don't do it automatically, but it's an option. If you pay on time, you can sign up to have it reported. So one benefit of that is that you're going to have, additional on-time payments reporting on your credit, and that's going to help your overall credit and your credit score, improve. So if you have anything like that, like let's say something that's not necessarily reporting, but you'd like it to report. So you definitely don't want to do this, if you have any late payments or anything like that. But if you have on-time payments that you're not reporting, that's a great way to kind of, add a little boost to your credit report. Okay, we can go to the next slide. And I think this is where I pass it over to Tyler.
Yeah, thanks so much, Liv. So we're going to change gears a little bit. Liv has been talking about your credit report, right? So that's going to be the big document that shows your kind of whole credit history, your accounts, the balances, and monthly payment history on those accounts, that type of thing, as well as some of the public information that Liv discussed as well. And so now we're going to switch gears and talk about a credit score, which is different than your credit report, but it is based in large part on a number of things that can be found in the credit report. So they're linked more or less together in some instances. And so what is it? So generally, a credit score is a number that kind of range from 300 on the low end, kind of generally seen as a worse credit score, all the way up to 850 on the high end. Again, kind of a good, kind of the best credit score you can have, right? And it's based on a number of things, and it was developed by a company called FICO. So if you ever heard the term FICO credit score, it's the same thing we're talking about here. And all it really is it is a number that's kind of derived from the data of millions of other consumers by this company called FICO. And they use it to essentially help lenders predict a consumer's behavior, really, how likely they to repay back debts that they owe. And so it's important because along with your credit report that Liv discussed, as well as any information on your credit application, if you're applying for a credit card or a loan, that type of thing, your credit score is one of the elements that a lender will consider when determining whether to lend money to you, and if so, under what terms, right? So a better credit score, you might get a lower interest rate, or it might help you get a higher credit limit on a credit card, that type of things. So it's along with the things inside your credit report, it's something you really want to work on to kind of maximize what you may be able to receive from lenders in the future. So I think we can go to the next slide, please, Lorena. So bearing in mind what kind of the purpose of the credit score is, and knowing that it's this kind of number in a large range, how are they calculated? And the real answer is that we don't know exactly how a credit score is calculated. Each of the credit bureaus, which we've discussed, Equifax, TransUnion, Experian, they all kind of have their own little secret formula they use to calculate those scores based on the credit reporting that they have. But we do know that there are several elements of the credit report that go into calculating your score. And so the most important thing that really you can consider is late payments. The more late payments you have, if you have pretty severe late payment history, maybe you haven't paid an account in 6 months, that's going to drive down your score. On the flip side, if you pay all your bills on time and you keep your accounts updated every month, that's going to generate a higher score. Similar with kind of the total debt and ratio you have on your credit. So if you have a credit limit of say $10,000, and you kind of max out that credit card to where you have like a $9,000, $8,000 balance every single month, generally that's going to lower your credit score because it's going to make it seem as though you don't pay off your debts each month. And in general, it makes you look more like a risky, a riskier debtor, so to speak. Some other things to consider are kind of the age and number of accounts you have. So generally, older accounts that have been open for a long time are going to boost your score. Whereas if you're relatively young, maybe you don't have a long credit history, that may generally lean in favor of a lower credit score. It's one of those things that creditors like to see that you've had accounts for a long time, that you've paid off consistently over a long period of time, because it makes you look more reliable when it comes to paying back your debts. Some other things that could impact your credit score might be if you have a lot of hard inquiries on your credit report. Maybe you've applied for a lot of loans or credit cards in recent months, that can lower your score. And also certain public record information. So maybe you have a bankruptcy in your past, or you've been sued by a creditor under a collection action before. Those types of things, those can all impact your credit score. That being said, there are certain things that credit scores are not impacted by, right? So it's going to be really aspects about you: race, religion, marital status, age, your job, where you live, how many times you've looked at your own credit report. Those types of things are not going to impact your credit score. It's going to be, kind of the subjective data they can use to compare to a bunch of other people. Really, and why we focus on the beginning is it's really focused on what's in your credit report. And so with that, we can go to the next slide, I believe, Lorena. So kind of similar to Liv with your credit report, before you can really take steps to improve your credit score, you kind of need to know what it is. And we should note that your credit score is not going to be included in your credit report because they are technically separate things. But that being said, especially in recent years, it's become pretty easy to get your credit score for free. A lot of people have heard the mobile app Credit Karma is a really common one. You can download on your phone, you can get your credit score that way. A lot of banks also offer services now to allow you to obtain your credit score. Discover, like I have Chase Bank on the Chase mobile app, you can access your credit score that way. So there are lots of free resources now that will allow you to see your credit score. And so then once you get it, maybe it's really high and you want to keep working on it, or maybe it's a little bit lower and you want to try to improve it. What steps can you take? And so it's important to note before you get too deep into this that your credit score is fluid. So it's likely going to change a little bit month to month. It may go up a little bit, maybe it goes down, but it's not going to change really drastically. So if you're looking to improve it, just go into it knowing that it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take some time. But if you're consistent and kind of use some of these tools we're about to talk about, and stay consistent, it will improve over time. But it's not going to be overnight, unfortunately. I wish it was that easy. But some general tips to keep in mind. I think the most important one, I think if you take anything away from this, it's that it's to make your payments on time. Late payments that show up in your credit report, collections actions, accounts that maybe become charged off because they haven't been paid in a while. Those are really going to hurt your credit score. And so even if the debt is small, if it's really large, if you can just keep making your monthly payments on time, that's going to go a long way into improving your credit score. It's also important, I think, to try to avoid applying for credit too frequently. Liv kind of talked about these hard inquiries that can show up in your credit report. If you apply for a credit card or, a loan, something like that, those can negatively impact your score. So if you apply for a bunch of things all at once or in a short period of time, all those inquiries are going to show up on your credit report all at once, and that can also kind of tank your score. So there's nothing wrong with applying for credit every now and then, but try to keep it reasonable. And to the extent you can, it's sometimes better to kind of use the credit you have to work on improving your score that way, as opposed to opening up a bunch of different accounts to try and make yourself look like a better debtor than you may be. So that kind of goes hand in hand too with the bottom bullet point you'll see here, is that I think it can be a natural reaction sometimes if you have debt that maybe you can't pay off every month, and maybe you try and take out a loan or some other line of credit to use that to pay down this debt that maybe is kind of dragging down your credit score. But we generally try to avoid doing that, simply because it kind of comes a circle, like an endless loop of, well, take out another line of credit to pay down this other line of credit. And so, to the extent you can, try to use the credit you have now to improve your score by making tiny payments, letting it drop off your credit report, things like that. And then finally, we talked about this a little bit before, but try to keep your balances under control. I think the numbers kind of fluctuates, but generally you want to try and keep, your use of your credit limit on a credit card, for instance, to like roughly 30% of your credit limit, right? So if you have a credit limit of $10,000, you generally want to try and keep your use of the credit score and your current balance to around 3,000, 4,000, right? If you consistently have those credit limits maxed out, it's going to drag down your score. So keeping those lower is also going to bump your score as well. And before I turn this over to Nate, one final piece of information. If maybe you're younger, you just don't have very many credit cards, you don't have a long credit history, it can be beneficial to at least try to get something on that report, even if it's just a secure credit card that you only have a certain amount of money you could spend on it. You can't spend any more. If you use that for little things and just generate a little bit of a credit history, that can be really beneficial to bumping your score. I know it sounds a bit counterintuitive, but if you don't have a long credit history, it can actually drop your score down because you don't have kind of a demonstrated history of behavior of you paying off debts. So that's something to consider too, if you don't have a very long credit history, you don't have a lot of debts you paid off in the past. But I think with that, we can go to the next slide. And I think you're up, Nate.
Perfect. Thank you, Tyler. And I think we had someone in the Q&A asking about secured credit cards, so that was perfectly timed there. All right, so moving on here, we've been talking a lot about the past and getting a better credit score. But what if you're having problems with debt right now? Things that may not have yet made it to your report or not yet reflected in your credit score. Maybe your credit isn't even the real concern and you're just trying to get by. The first thing to realize is you are not alone. Most people face financial problems at some point in their lives. It could be caused by personal or family illness, loss of a job, or simply overspending. It can seem overwhelming, but often it can be overcome. Your financial situation does not have to go from bad to worse. You have several options, which we'll discuss. And of course, the best one for you will depend on your personal situation. So the first thing here is developing a budget. The first step towards taking control of your financial situation is to develop a budget, how much you spend and how much you take in each month. You're going to want to list income from all your sources. You know, your job, anything you do on the side, any, freelance work, things like that. And then fixed expenses, your mortgage, rent, car, things that you know and expect to be the same every month. And then from there, you list your varying expenses, which can be entertainment, shopping, dining out, things of that nature. You're going to want to write down all of your expenses, even if they seem insignificant. Even if you get a cup of coffee at Dunkin' Donuts every day and it's, $2 or $1.75, that'll add up. That's about $50 a month, $600 a year, just in, a cup of coffee that may seem insignificant on a daily basis. This will help you identify necessary expenses and prioritize the rest. The goal is to make sure you can make ends meet in the basics and then figure out what can be used to pay down your existing debt. So you can find information about budgeting here or just on the internet to help out with that. Okay, so next up here, we've got contacting your creditors. If you're having trouble making ends meet, contact your creditors immediately. Tell them why you're having problems, try to work out a modified payment plan, and maybe you can, take a couple months off, get a brief grace period, reduce payments, something like that you can work out with the creditor directly. It's best to not wait until the accounts are turned over to a collection agency or a lawyer to kind of deal with these debts that you have. So speaking of that, next, dealing with the debt collectors. If your debts are turned over to debt collectors, realize that there's something called the Federal Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, which provides strict regulations over debt collectors, regulates how and when they can contact you, and how they're allowed to act or not act when they do contact you about your debt. For one thing, debt collectors cannot call you before 8 a.m. or after 9 p.m. They cannot call you at your place of work if the debt collector knows that you can't be called at work. They cannot harass you, lie to you, or be abusive in any way when they do contact you about your debt. And further, if you dispute the debt that they're trying to collect from you in writing, then they have to provide a validation letter of the debt that you have to you. So it's best to do this in writing, which we've talked about a couple other things tonight. They must honor a written request from you to stop further contact. So this law that we're speaking about doesn't take away the fact that you owe the money, but it does require that you be treated with respect by debt collectors when they try to collect this debt from you. Next up, we've got debt consolidation. This is another option that you can have when you're dealing with debts that are building up. May be able to lower the cost of your credit and manage your bills by consolidating your debts together. You can get maybe a credit card with a lower interest rate or a 0% interest for consolidated amounts forever or for a period of time. Maybe through home equity or a line of credit. Putting your home up as collateral could lose home if you can't make payments. Cost of consolidation can add up and can have certain tax advantages. All right, so that's one option there, is to consolidate your debts, get a lower monthly payment, and hopefully pay those debts off over time. All right, and then next up, this is kind of the last resort, which is a personal bankruptcy. This is the last resort because a bankruptcy stays on your credit report for 10 years, and they can make it very difficult to obtain credit, buy a home, get life insurance, or sometimes to get a job. But on the other hand, bankruptcy is an option that provides a fresh start when there's no other way. Allows people who follow the bankruptcy rules to receive what is called a discharge, or a court order that says you don't have to repay certain debts. Okay, we can go to the next slide now, Lorena. All right, this slide is about avoiding scams and identity theft. There's no quick and easy solution to resolving your debt, similar to improving your credit score. When you're overwhelmed with debt and feelings that you've lost control over your finances, it can seem really appealing to turn to a business that offers help in resolving debt problems. Before doing so, however, there's a couple things to keep in mind. You're going to want to contact the Better Business Bureau to look into the company and see, you know, their history in dealing with this field, and if they're reputable. You may want to contact your local consumer protection agency about this company, and potentially even the state attorney general's office for more information. You're going to want to be wary of commercials and solicitations promising debt relief. Many of them are really offering a bankruptcy, and you want to know the difference before you agree to anything. Because remember, a bankruptcy stays on your credit report for 10 years and will hinder your ability to get credit, potentially get a job, or maybe find a place to live. Plus, that option may cost more money in court fees, attorney's fees, and other things that you know, wouldn't be involved in the alternative. In general, if a company offers debt relief that sounds good to be true, it is probably a scam, and you should be wary of that. Okay, next we've got credit repair scams. Usually it's consumers with bad credit problems or those with no credit who are targeted for these scams. Newspaper ads, TV, internet mailings, flyers, radio, and telemarketers are all different ways that you can be reached regarding these credit repair scams. So essentially, these scams promise to erase bad credit, guarantee you that they will do that. They can say, we can remove your bankruptcies, judgments, liens, bad loans, and we'll remove those from your credit file forever. And create a new credit identity legally. These are all things to look out for, and are signs that this might be a credit repair scam as opposed to a legitimate option for you to follow. Okay, so there's something called CROA, or the Credit Repair Organization Act, which requires credit repair companies to give you a pamphlet titled Consumer Credit File Rights under state and federal law before you sign a contract. This law requires that credit repair organization may not make false claims about their services. They may not charge you, or they cannot charge you until it has given you the promised services. And a credit repair organization cannot perform any services until they have your signature on a written contract, and a 3-day waiting period has elapsed, during which time you have the right to cancel the contract without paying any fees. When you enter a contract with a credit repair organization, that contract must contain the following. 1, the total cost of the services, a detailed description of the services to be performed, how long it will take to achieve the results, any guarantees that they offer, and the company's name and business address. To avoid scams, you don't want to do business with any company that wants you to pay for credit repair services before the services are provided, does not tell you your rights and what you can do for yourself for free, recommends that you not contact a consumer reporting agency directly, suggests that you try to invent a new credit report by applying for an EIN instead of using your social security number, and advises you to dispute all information in your credit report or take any action that seems illegal, such as creating a new identity. So there's risk to you if you follow bad advice from one of these scam organizations. If you follow illegal advice and commit fraud, you may be subject to prosecution. If you use the mail or telephone to apply for credit and provide false information, you may be charged or prosecuted for mail or wire fraud. And it's a federal crime to make false statements on a loan or credit application, to misrepresent your social security number, and to obtain an EIN under false pretenses. Okay, so next is identity theft. How do identity thieves get your information? Obtain records from employers by hacking into computers, bribing employees, or stealing it on the job. They go dumpster diving, rummaging through trash for personal information. They can pose as a landlord, employer, or someone else with a legal right to access your information. There's something called skimming. They steal your credit card or debit card numbers by capturing the information in a data storage device. They can steal mail, including bank and credit card statements, complete a change of address form to divert your mail to another location. There's something else to be aware of called pretexting, which is when they obtain your personal information under false pretenses and then sell that information to people who may use it to get a credit line in your name, steal your assets, to investigate or sue you. For example, a pretexter may call, claim he's from a survey firm, and ask you a few questions. When the pretexter has the information he wants, he uses it to call your financial institution. He pretends to be you or someone with authorized access to your account. He might claim that he's forgotten his checkbook and needs information about his account. Using this method, the pretexter may be able to obtain personal information about you, such as your social security number, bank and credit card account numbers, information in your credit report, and the existence and size of your savings and investment portfolios. And another way that may seem a little more straightforward is they steal wallets or purses, burglarize your home to obtain personal information. So once they have this information, how do identity thieves use it? They can open credit accounts in your name, applying for credit cards, auto loans, things of that nature, which is why it's important to check your credit report, as Liv was talking about at the beginning, to keep an eye out for these sorts of things. They can obtain access to existing accounts, take money out of a checking or a savings account and transfer it to themselves, or they can open a checking account and immediately start bouncing checks to their new account. So given all this, how do you protect yourself? Like I was just mentioning, you're going to want to read your credit report. You're going to want to read your credit card and bank statements carefully and often. You want to know your payment due dates. If a bill doesn't show up when you expect, you need to look into that. Further, you can shred any documentation with personal and financial information once you're done using it. When you're disposing of personal devices like phones, tablets, computers, make sure they are completely wiped and do not contain any personal data. As far as the credit reporting goes, you're going to want to review that at least 3 times per year, or excuse me, at least your 3 credit reports once per year. So that would be a total of 3 times reviewing those. You want to make sure your mail is delivered to a secure mailbox with a lock, especially if you live in a place where the public may have access to the mail room where you receive your mail. And you're going to want to use strong and private passwords for your phone, computer, and financial accounts. So if it comes down to it and something happens and your identity has been stolen, what do? You're going to want to place a fraud alert on your credit report and review your credit reports for what's going on. You're going to want to close the account that you know or believe has been tampered with or opened fraudulently. File a report with your local police or the police in the community where the identity theft took place if it's in a different part of the country. And file a complaint with the FTC. Okay, I think that is the last slide, if I'm not mistaken, Lorena. Perfect. Okay, so at this point, I know we had a couple questions throughout the presentation, so now would be a good time to take a look at those and any other questions that you all may have.
Yeah, and I saw that the first question popped up, and I'm not sure if everybody can see this one. Maybe Lorena can correct me if I'm wrong.
Sure.
But I can read it out loud. So our first question says that they're currently being sued by a third party on behalf of another creditor. However, they've been unsuccessful getting the original application. The debt is from 1995, went into judgment in 2004, 2005. And then it looks like some motions were filed as well. So I think this question is asking, about retrieving an original application for the debt. So maybe if it's a credit card debt, the application that they put in for the credit card. I know 1995. So first thing that pops into my mind for options, if you're looking to obtain your original application, that could be, reaching out to whoever the initial creditor was. So instead of this third party, maybe if you've been reaching out to the third party, try the original creditor, see if you can get a copy of the application that way. I know 1995 is a while ago now, so they may not have that in their files anymore, which could be part of the issue. So, another option could be to reach out to that third party, and see if there's some type of settlement that you could reach with them so that you don't have to engage in the back and forth in court anymore. There's a thing called a statute of limitations, and what that means is that a creditor can only sue you over a debt for a certain period of time. So that period of time depends on, what state you live in or where you originated that debt. But if it was in Illinois, I believe ours is 5 years. So, a creditor can only sue you within 5 years after your last payment. So that might be something to consider if it's, a really old debt. And then last piece of advice would just obviously be to consult an attorney, given your specific circumstances. Having a legal professional help you, figure out exactly what's going on is definitely the best solution, which is kind of a non-answer, but hopefully a little helpful. And then the second question, I know Tyler mentioned on that already, so maybe, I don't know, Tyler, if you have anything else to add to that one.
Yeah, I can take the second question. Yeah, I think to add on to your answer to the first one, Liv, I think it sounds like this is like an active lawsuit that that the attorney was asking about. So I mean, if that's the case, I think certainly reaching out to an attorney and talking to them about your options is probably the best move going forward. Particularly if you have been sued. There might be certain things you could do within the lawsuit itself to get access to the application. But for that instance, probably best to talk to an attorney to see what your options are. It looks like Melanie, I think this was you following up about that. Yeah, I think your best option is probably to speak to someone, since it sounds like this is kind of an ongoing legal situation. We probably can't give you too much advice here. Without knowing more and having kind of an attorney-client relationship. So I would probably reach out to an attorney if you can, to maybe figure out your next steps there. But I think the question that I was gonna also jump onto was, so I'm just wondering, I currently applied for and received a secured credit card through my job. What positive impact can this card have on my credit over time versus a traditional credit card? And so, I mean, really, I think secured credit cards can be a good option, particularly if you don't have a long credit history. Maybe it's harder to get a credit card without more of a prolonged credit history, or maybe you have a low credit score because of other issues in the past. And they are gonna really kind of work largely the same way a regular credit card would. They're obviously nice because you can't kind of go over a credit limit. You have a certain amount of money, kind of like a debit card, and you can't spend more than that. So as long as you make your timely payments every month, and you kind of watch the balance and keep it kind of below your limit, they're going to work just like a traditional credit card. I think can be a really good option for those who maybe are trying to work to improve their credit but don't have a long history, or they're trying to get over some, prior issues. Yeah, so I think they're great and they work really largely about the same as a regular credit card would.
Great, thank you. Kind of jumping off from that point, do any of you have any recommendations in terms of where to find a good credit card, especially for someone who's just starting out? A young person, someone who wants to find a quality credit card. There's thousands of ones you can apply for from all sorts of places. Do you have any good sources for rating or evaluating those or finding them for people who have like little or no credit?
And maybe Nate and Tyler can jump in here too, but and kind of another non-answer, but whichever credit card will work best for you for making on-time payments. So, really doesn't matter which company you go with, or which type of credit card you go with. Even like Tyler said, secured or unsecured, it's still gonna report the same on your credit report. So whatever works best for you, is, or what fits maybe your interests with, the perks that a credit card may have. And I don't know if Nate or Tyler have any other ideas for that one.
Yeah, I don't have a ton else to add. I think it's always not a bad option just to kind of start, maybe wherever you have a checking account or savings account, right now, wherever you're banking, look to see what options they have since you're kind of familiar with them, they're familiar with you. Sometimes you can even kind of get like pre-approval for credit cards, if you're kind of an established customer with that bank already. I know too, like mentioned earlier, the Credit Karma app, to check your credit score. I know a lot of times too, they can have recommendations kind of based on your credit profile for, certain credit cards that you might be a good fit for, that you might have a good chance of being approved for. So I think that's a good option too. But any of the major banks I think are a decent place to start too, because they're gonna have lots of options. And usually pretty friendly, platforms to be able to make payments and see different information and things like that.
Great, thank you. We have another in the Q&A wondering, does medical delinquency show up on a credit report?
So if you have medical bills that are going unpaid to the point that they're being turned over to a collection agency, that's when you're going to start to see that show up on your credit report. So just like if you had a credit card that was charged off, where let's say you didn't make any payments on it for 180 days, and it was charged off, the bank would report that. Similarly, to like maybe a large medical bill, I guess any size medical bill that goes unpaid for a certain duration of time would likely eventually be sent to a collections agency. And then, that collections agency is going to report that information to one of the credit bureaus. So that's when you would see it on your credit report.
I know that the state of Illinois has been working on buying back medical debt for some Illinois citizens. I know there are some other organizations that do the same. Do you know anything about the application process for that, or how to look into getting your medical debt paid off by one of these organizations?
I don't. I'm sorry. I don't know if my colleagues have any insight into that. I'm not sure.
Fortunately, I'm not familiar with that either, Lorena. So no input there.
That might be something to look into if you do have medical debt. Look into medical debt forgiveness. And obviously you want to look for credible sources like the state of Illinois or registered charities. But there are charities that are devoted to that, so that might be something to look into. But again, obviously you want to be careful of scams. Let's see. Someone else wants to know: should you pay off charged off accounts?
So with a charged off account, I know we talked about this a little bit before, but because it was charged off, it's going to report on your credit report for those 7 years. So, you know, a lot of times you can reach out and reach some type of settlement to pay off the balance, and you might be able to get a settlement for, you know, less than the full balance. You know, and pay part of it, and then it would start reporting, you know, on the trade line that it's paid. It would still report that it's charged off, but it'd be better to have, you know, a paid, even if it says, you know, settled in part, or, you know, there's different annotations that can show up on a credit trade line. But in short, it would still show up on your report as charged off for those 7 years, but it would be a better type of charge off.
Yeah, to kind of jump off on that as well, I think sometimes there can be a misconception that if an account is charged off, is that it kind of erases the debt, which isn't true. I think it's important to remember that even if an account is charged off, you do technically still owe that money. So yeah, maybe a situation of, you know, finding out who owns the debt. Maybe if it's charged off, a lot of times companies will sell it to a collection agency or some other company. Yeah, so finding out who owns it, and then, you know, I think it's better to certainly at least try and settle it for purposes of, you know, your credit report than just leaving it and letting it be. So yeah, something to look into if you do have those accounts that have been charged off.
So I have a question that is probably completely unfair, because everything is so much up in the air right now. But following the current political situation, the attempts to perhaps close down or reduce the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau at the federal level, do you have any thoughts or advice in terms of how people can protect themselves, how they should react, or what measures they should take, who else they should contact at the state level or otherwise, if they do run into consumer issues?
That's a hard-hitting question.
Sorry.
Oh, no, I totally appreciate it. And agree with your assessment that it's so up in the air right now that it's difficult to know what's going to happen, or, you know, what consumers should plan for. I think the CFPB has so many great resources that are obviously still available. And, you know, consumers can find out more information that way. As far as reaching out to like a specific state representative, I'm not sure if I have any insight into that. But I guess, you know, just with the crazy changing landscape, just keeping up to date with everything that's going on, being mindful, you know, of any large changes that might impact you personally or your credit personally. But I guess I don't have a great answer to that one either.
That's okay. I was not expecting miracles. I do want to put just in the chat here, if I can get this right, because they are taking down a lot of federal web pages unpredictably, that have a lot of this information. The Internet Archive often has archived versions of the web page as they appeared before they were taken down. So if you go to a website and you were expecting to see something that is no longer there, the link I just put in the chat, web.archive.org, is a place where you can go and often see the former version, what it was before it was taken down. So a lot of know your rights, consumer guides, that sort of thing. If it's not on the CFPB website anymore or on some other website, check the Internet Archive and see if it's there, because a lot of the rules will still apply even if you can't see them on the website. We do have a couple more Q&As. One asks, do you have any advice? I already paid my credit card. After that, should I close it? If so, will that impact the credit score?
I could take that one, or at least start, and then maybe get some input from my colleagues as well. I think it kind of depends on your personal situation. You know, if you paid it off and you don't plan on using it anymore and you have no intention of using it, then maybe it would be a good idea to close it and, you know, not leave it just kind of hanging out there. You could forget about it. It could be you know, a potential issue down the line. If you do forget about it and, you know, someone gets access to that information, it's not something you're checking regularly, that could be an issue. Something else to think about is something that Tyler was talking about is kind of your credit history and the amount of lines of credit you have open are something that could be helpful for your credit score. So if you have it all paid off and you can just keep it and use it for something set every month, you know what it's going to be and you can pay it off every month, you know, that's something you can keep open and continuing checking and using, and something that could help, you know, potentially improve your credit score too. So, you know, it kind of depends on your personal situation, and, you know, if you're just done with it, you don't want to use it anymore, probably better to close it than to forget about it. But, you know, if it's paid off and you want to keep using it for something, you know, as a way to increase your, you know, your credit history and the lines of credit you have and your positive payments, you know, that's something you can keep it open and use it for, if that's the route you want to go. So kind of just goes along with your personal goals and, you know, your budget and things that you're thinking about for yourself, and kind of go from there.
Great. Thank you so much. I don't see any other questions in the chat right now. It is 7:05, so we are pretty close to on time. I want to thank all three of you, Liv, Nate, and Tyler, for taking the time to speak with us tonight and answer all of the questions. For everyone watching, this is being recorded, so it will be available within the next couple of days on our Law at the Library playlist at the Evanston Public Library. You can watch it again. You can share it with friends who might find it helpful. As always, my contact information is there in the chat. If you have any questions, you can always contact me or the Chicago Public Library if you have any questions about this series or the presentation tonight. So thank you very much, the team at Pilgrim Christakis. We really appreciate you.
Thanks so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you,
Have a wonderful
everyone.
night, everyone.